Thanks a
Okay.
lot, Shane. Shane just turned on recording. Thanks a lot for hopping on. We're talking a little bit about how to interview designers, because I was curious and asking Shane about how should I kind of approach this as a product manager, and then Shane was going into some details about how he approaches that. So Shane, please.
So beyond the good protocol that's in place about just making people feel comfortable on a human level and all that, I think when designers are talking about their work, it's important to ask them to speak to what they did versus what the team did. Because designs are often the culmination of everybody's work, the designer, the PM, developers, it's easy for a designer to blur the lines and speak to things like product strategy or design work that they didn't contribute to. And so I always try to put an earnest check in place in a polite way. Please point out what you did specifically in addition to what the team did. So I think that's important. I also find designers are generally the most comfortable and will give you the best sense of who they are and what it'll be like to work with them when they're able to present some of their work. So I would ask them to present a project that they feel represents their capabilities and creative caliber and design caliber, and to talk about it beginning to end, you know, kind of the STAR format. What was the situation? What was the business goal? What was your task or role? How did you help achieve that business goal? Right? So I'm less interested in pixels and colors. That stuff I'll see as you walk through the project, and I'll be able to assess how well, but I'd like to hear designers speak strategically from a business perspective, much like a product person would.
What distinguishes an outstanding candidate from a good to mediocre candidate?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. For me, if I'm speaking to somebody that's clearly strategic, they understand that the work is more than pixels and icons. They're able to articulate their role in that project and how it relates to business objectives. As they talk about how they arrived at the solution, it's clear that they were inclusive in their design process, that they understand how to harness diverse stakeholder input and align everyone to a shared strategic solution. So when they're speaking about how they work with others, does it sound collaborative, iterative, lightweight? You know, what tone are they using when they speak to dev stakeholders or PM stakeholders? Is it clear that they see those folks as assets in their design work, or are they coming across like they're sort of frustrated or having to manage that input? Do they understand contemporary development methodologies? You know, are they using agile terminology, lean startup terminology? That's really important to me, because if you're able to iterate in a lightweight fashion, that means you can iterate and learn faster and arrive at a better conclusion. And especially if you're able to do that in a collaborative way, cross-functionally. So I'm always looking for that. I think it's important to weed out designers, you know, the design diva personality, so to speak, by asking them tough questions about, well, what if somebody disagreed with part of your design that you knew was right? How would you manage that feedback? And how would you manage that feedback is almost too giving. I would say, how would you deal with that situation so that, you know, I'm not leading the witness.
Right. I'll echo something you said, which is like, I love it in all my interviews when I push people to be very specific about the specific things that they did. Because I think with specific design interviews, like it's very easy to kind of just stay at a very high level and describe your design process in very philosophical ways. But it's like, no. Like, walk me through exactly how many like workshops did you do? How many users did you talk to? What artifacts did you create to capture that information? What surprised you about like what you learned? And like those are the types of things where I really learn a lot more about their capabilities and their design approach. For me personally, like I break them down like the PM interview into, because I don't think there's any guidance in terms of like what question you're supposed to ask or how to approach it. I generally break it down into 3 parts. First one is exploring your design process. The second part is how you work and build with developers. And the third is how you collaborate specifically with product and engineering. And so for the first, like I will generally walk through their portfolio and I'll comb through what they've done. And I generally will look for things that I'm not reading about. Because they generally will design, like they'll talk about their design process and show different artifacts and different things that they've created. And I'll look for things that are not explained. Like, how did you even know this was the right problem to work on? Like, who's setting priorities? Mm-hmm. The best designers in my mind that I've worked with are ones that are generative, who are coming to the table with ideas about things that the team should be working on. And they're not just taking tickets from product managers and saying, oh, well, PM says we should work on this thing next. So cool, I'm just going to take that and run with it. And so like, I'm interested in like answering that question. Are they generative? Are they like contributing and collaborating to that process? Like, are they iterative? Like generally in design portfolios, they're presented as like, we explored a bunch of stuff, we asked a bunch of questions, we asked some user stuff, and then we came up with this beautiful new design. Well, like that didn't happen overnight. So like, how did it get built? Like, how did you iterate towards that goal? Like, how did you build the case for this is the thing that we need to build and this is the right design? So I look for those things that are not like in their design portfolio and like start probing on those like specific things.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that I'm looking for, right? I don't want you to describe the typical design lifecycle, discovery, I'm not looking for you to describe a process diagram to me. I'd like a real world sense of how you work. And now, like you said, it's what I was driving at when I brought up strategic designers. And I'm always looking for that, designers that think like product people. As a designer, do you see yourself kind of being this cog in the system where you fit in between when product hands you something and then you wireframe it and hand it to dev and that's how you see design? Or do you think more end to end? Have you elevated yourself and are you participating in everything from planning to validation, asking challenging things like, well, what is it we're doing and why are we doing it from a business perspective? I need to understand that. Who's going to be using it? Those are the things that any designer with their salt needs to be doing in order to really arrive at valuable solutions versus just, releasing the right thing versus something.
Yeah.
And not everybody is quite there yet. It's not that I expect everyone to have the perfect answers to all those questions, but I want to see somebody that's growing in that direction, right? Trending in that way, interested in becoming that type of a designer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because like some candidates have asked about their past experiences, and then there have been some flags where they're like, oh, we got engineering involved late, or like we actually didn't collaborate in this way. And then I say like, oh, that's interesting. And then I say like, if you could design your own experience, go and design your own process, what would it look like? And they're like, oh, well, you'd be much more collaborative, and like they describe it, and I'm like, okay, that's great. So I have to sometimes just like separate candidates who may have been like large company, we're not operating in an agile way, from those who are like, I really want to like operate that way. I just haven't been able to because of like something in that company or like the way they did business or like some legacy process. So like sometimes I try to ask tell me about like how it came to be, in your experience, but then also tell me about like how it freed of like, any like constraints, like how you would design your design process and like operate. And they're like, well, I would do it this way. I'm like, cool, that's kind of how we try to do things in GitLab. So that's perfect. So anyway.
Yeah, I think GitLab is the exception, not the rule for sure for a designer. That GitLab being so open and even in terms of contribution, designers often are not put in anything close to this environment, and it can be a struggle for them. Their hands can be tied in some ways, and the best ones will acknowledge that, but not be upset about it. They'll just say that is one of the many constraints that I was operating under at that company, and I did the best I could with what I had to work with, and that's my job, right? It's to make the most of what I have to work with and to try to do my part to contribute to positive change over time, to evolve the organization. Like those are the things that pragmatism, somebody that's persistent, meaning they want to drive towards better, but also pragmatic about how to make that happen.
Yeah, totally. All right. Thanks for the conversation. I got to
Yeah,
jump to another call, but appreciate you staying on a couple minutes extra to chat about this. It's really helpful to hear your thoughts.
sure. Happy to. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Much appreciated. See you
All
around.
right. Bye.